I never thought we'd see each other again, but after half a decade, I accidentally ran into my ex-wife who cheated on me with my best friend. My name is Ethan, and I'm 29 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened on what was supposed to be just another regular Thursday. The kind of day you forget about even while you're living it. The morning air was thick and humid, sticking to your skin like glue, making everything feel sluggish and heavy. I had just parked my truck outside Bennett's hardware store. Nothing exciting, just needed to grab some parts for the bathroom faucet I still hadn't bothered to fix. That damn thing had been leaking for months now, ever since I moved into my apartment across town after the divorce. There was no one to complain about the constant dripping except me, and no one to hear it echoing through the silence but me. That's how my life had been for the past 4 years. Quiet, solitary, and predictable. 4 years since Victoria disappeared into someone else's life, taking everything I thought I knew about love and trust with her. 4 years of trying to rebuild myself from the wreckage she left behind. The sound of tires crunching over gravel snapped my attention toward the parking lot entrance. A sleek silver SUV was turning in, unfamiliar and expensive looking. Something about the way it moved made my stomach roll with an inexplicable dread. I don't even know what it was exactly. Maybe the precise way it turned into the parking spot. Maybe nothing at all. But when the driver's door opened and she stepped out, the entire world just stopped. Victoria. She didn't look like a ghost from my past or some faded memory that had lost its sharp edges over time. She looked like she was exactly where she wanted to be, completely in control of her surroundings. She wore these black sunglasses that probably cost more than my entire toolbox. And her hair was longer now, lighter than I remembered it being. Her posture said everything it had always said back when she thought she was above everyone else. That sharp, cutting grace that seemed to slice through the air as she walked. She popped open the back of the SUV and pulled out a plastic bin filled with what looked like kids' basketball gear. Then I saw her, a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, who jumped down from the back seat with the boundless energy only children possess. She had brown hair tied up in 2 neat little braids, and she grabbed a bright orange basketball before skipping ahead of Victoria, calling out in a clear, happy voice, "Mom, hurry up!" That word, Mom, hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I hadn't seen Victoria since the night she chose her boss over me, left her key on our kitchen table, and told me with absolutely no shame in her voice that this wasn't working, while she adjusted the strap of the dress she had probably worn for him earlier that day. She never looked back, never checked in, not even a single text message. No closure, no explanation, just silence. Like the years we had built together didn't mean a damn thing to her. I realized I hadn't moved from my truck. My hands were braced against the steering wheel so tightly that there was no blood left in my fingers, just pressure and the beginning of pain. That's when she saw me. She didn't flinch or look away like someone caught off guard. She just stared at me like I was some distant memory she hadn't expected to run into while running errands. Slowly, deliberately, she took off her sunglasses like this was her moment to control the situation. Then she walked toward me with that same confident stride I remembered too well. I forced myself to get out of the truck, my legs stiff and unsteady. I didn't say her name, didn't say anything at first. My chest felt like it was burning from the inside out. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she actually smirked. That same condescending expression that used to make me question my own sanity. "Well, this is surreal," she said, and her voice hadn't changed at all. It was still laced with that particular brand of smugness, still sounded like she had rehearsed everything she was going to say to make it sound casual and unaffected. "What the hell are you doing here?" I finally managed to ask, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She shrugged like it was absolutely nothing, like running into your ex-husband after 4 years of complete silence was just another mundane occurrence. "We just moved back last month," she said, with that same infuriating casualness. "Derek got transferred here for work, so we thought we'd settle in this area for a while." She paused, looking me up and down with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You look exactly the same, you know." Derek. The name hit me like a punch to the stomach. Derek was the guy she used to sneak around with behind my back, the one who was supposedly just helping her with work stuff back when she started leaving the house wearing makeup she never bothered to put on for me. He was the one who stole my entire life through a series of dim hotel rooms and secret calendar appointments that I was too trusting to notice until it was far too late. Victoria nodded toward the little girl who was now bouncing the orange basketball against the pavement in a rhythmic pattern. "That's Luna," she said simply. as if introducing a child who might be mine was just another piece of casual conversation. The name rattled around in my brain like a marble in an empty jar. Luna. She didn't offer any additional information, no explanation for the 4 years of silence, no apology for the way she had vanished from my life. She acted like the last 4 years didn't need any context whatsoever, like we were just old acquaintances catching up on recent developments. I couldn't stop staring at the little girl, at Luna. She had Victoria's eyes. That much was unmistakable, but her hair was brown, a rich chocolate brown that looked exactly like mine. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable, and the more I looked, the more my mind started connecting dots I wasn't sure I was ready to connect. Victoria noticed where my attention had gone, and I watched her smirk drop just a little, replaced by something sharper and more defensive. "Don't," she warned quietly, her voice taking on that edge I remembered all too well. "Don't even go there, Ethan." But I was already there. My mind was already racing through possibilities, through timelines, through the mathematics of betrayal and conception. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there staring at this little girl who might be my daughter, while my brain tried to claw its way through 4 years of silence, betrayal, and half-healed wounds that were suddenly ripping open again. Luna was completely oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults around her. She was kicking her basketball in a crooked circle on the pavement, humming some tuneless melody to herself, completely unaware that the man standing 10 feet away might be her biological father. The innocence of it, the pure childhood joy in her movements, made everything feel even more surreal and painful. Victoria stepped between us then, positioning herself like she could physically block the thoughts from forming in my head. "She's not yours," she said quickly. Too quickly, with the kind of speed that comes from panic rather than certainty. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd walked back into my life. She had that particular edge in her tone, the same one she always used when she was hiding something important. It was the exact same tone she had used the night I found her text thread with Derek, when she tried to make me feel crazy and paranoid for reading what was displayed in plain sight on her phone screen. "You sure about that?" I asked, keeping my voice low and controlled despite the storm building inside my chest. Her jaw clenched visibly, and she crossed her arms in a defensive posture that told me everything I needed to know. "Positive," she said, but the word came out brittle and unconvincing. I let out a laugh, dry and sharp and completely devoid of humor. "Funny," I said, never taking my eyes off Luna. "She looks a hell of a lot more like me than she does Derek." Victoria's eyes flicked toward her daughter, then snapped back to me with a fury I recognized all too well. She folded her arms across her chest in that defensive stance she always adopted when she was about to go on the attack. "Don't do this, Ethan," she said, her voice taking on that cold, cutting quality that used to make me question my own reality. "You have no right to suddenly show up and play the victim here." Then came the words that felt like knives sliding between my ribs, each one delivered with surgical precision. "You were never enough," she continued, her voice gaining strength and venom with each syllable. "You never pushed yourself to be anything more than what you were. You just coasted through life like everything would magically work out on its own, without any real effort on your part." She was just getting started, and I could see the familiar pattern emerging. The way she would tear me down systematically, methodically, until I questioned everything about myself. "Derek was ambitious," she said, practically spitting the words at me. "He had vision, he had drive, he had goals that extended beyond just getting by. You were content to fix pipes and watch football on weekends like that was some kind of life plan." I felt the old anger beginning to churn in my stomach, that familiar mix of rage and hurt that she'd always been so skilled at provoking. "And what?" I shot back, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "That gave you a hall pass? That's your excuse for completely blowing up our marriage?" She raised an eyebrow with that infuriating smirk that suggested my question was somehow beneath her consideration. "Our marriage was already over, Ethan," she said, with the kind of casual cruelty that takes years to perfect. "You just didn't notice because you never paid attention to anything that mattered." I took a step forward, lowering my voice so Luna wouldn't overhear what was rapidly becoming a confrontation that could scar a child. "You didn't even have the basic decency to end it before you started sleeping with your boss," I said, each word carefully controlled but carrying the weight of 4 years of suppressed fury. She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic about something trivial. "Don't be so melodramatic," she said dismissively. "It wasn't just about that. The affair was just a symptom of something that was already broken beyond repair. Then what was it about? I snapped, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Because I gave you everything I had, Victoria. I supported you through every job change, every emotional breakdown, every moment when you doubted yourself and needed someone to believe in you. And all I got in return was a wife who couldn't keep her lies straight for more than 5 minutes. She didn't flinch at the accusation. Instead, she looked at me with something that might have been pity, which somehow felt worse than outright hatred. You want to know what it was really about? She asked, her voice dropping to a conversational tone that made the words hit even harder. I was bored. You were predictable, safe, comfortable. He wasn't. That simple statement silenced me completely. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I absolutely did believe her, and it stung worse than anything else she could have possibly said. It was the kind of truth that cuts deep because it confirms your worst fears about yourself. That you weren't enough. That you never had been enough. That everything you thought you were building together was just an illusion you were too naive to see through. Luna ran up between us at that exact moment, tugging at her mother's hand with the unconscious timing that only children possess. "Can we go, Mommy?" she asked, her voice bright and innocent and completely oblivious to the emotional carnage happening above her head. "I'm getting really hungry." Victoria immediately shifted gears, kneeling down to Luna's level and whispering something in her ear that I couldn't quite catch. The little girl looked up at me with those wide, curious eyes and gave me a small wave. The kind of gesture that breaks your heart because it's so pure and trusting. I couldn't wave back. I physically couldn't make my hand move in response. I just stood there, completely frozen as they turned and walked away from me. I watched the woman who had systematically destroyed everything I thought I knew about love and commitment stroll off casually with a child who might very well have been mine. A child she had never told me about. A child whose existence had been hidden from me for what could have been her entire life. As their figures grew smaller in the distance, I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't going to let this go. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of mental noise that I couldn't turn down or escape from. Everything around me felt half real, like I was moving through the world underwater, while everyone else continued their lives at normal speed above the surface. I went through all the expected motions of daily existence. Drinking coffee that tasted like nothing, answering work calls with responses I don't remember giving, paying bills that seemed completely irrelevant to the chaos in my head. But my mind kept looping back obsessively to her face, to the sound of her voice, to that little girl's innocent wave. Most of all, I couldn't stop hearing that smug line Victoria had tossed over her shoulder before walking away. "She's not yours." She had said it like she was slamming a door shut on any possibility of discussion. But I knew Victoria better than she thought I did. That door had never really closed for her. She had just locked it from the inside and waited for me to give up and go away like I always had before. That night, I found myself pulling out the old cardboard box from the back of my bedroom closet. It was taped up and unlabeled, the one I had sworn to myself I would throw out at least 100 times over the past 4 years, but never quite managed to follow through on. Inside were the last pathetic remains of what we used to be together. Our wedding photo with both of us smiling like we actually believed it would last forever. Her scribbled "I love you" notes from back when we still played house and pretended we were building something permanent. There was a gold bracelet I had given her on our 3rd anniversary, the one she had claimed to love, but probably pawned off for hotel room wine with Derek. And there, at the very bottom of the box like some kind of buried treasure, was my copy of our old insurance paperwork. Victoria's social security number, her date of birth, her previous job information, all the basic identifying details that most divorced people throw away, but I had kept for reasons I couldn't quite explain. As it turned out, that was all I was going to need. I didn't want to believe I would actually go through with what I was considering, but I found myself picking up my phone and calling my old buddy Connor. He used to work in IT before transitioning to freelance skip tracing, basically finding people who didn't want to be found, tracking down information that others preferred to keep buried. He was exactly the kind of person who could help me get the answers I needed. "DNA test?" he asked when I explained what I was looking for, and I was grateful that there was no judgment in his voice, just the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had heard stranger requests. "Yeah," I said, barely recognizing the sound of my own voice as the words came out. "I need to know if Luna's actually mine." Connor was quiet for a moment, probably considering the implications and complications of what I was asking. You know Victoria is going to completely lose her mind if she finds out you're doing this, he said finally. She blew up mine 4 years ago, I replied flatly, surprised by how cold and determined I sounded. I think it's time we evened the score. Connor agreed to help, and suddenly the plan became real in a way that both terrified and energized me. All I had to do was get close enough to Luna to obtain a hair sample or some other form of genetic material for testing. And that meant I was going to have to see them again, which meant deliberately putting myself back into Victoria's orbit after 4 years of carefully maintained distance. It didn't take long to figure out how to make that happen. The following Friday morning, I found myself staking out the same basketball court where Victoria had brought Luna the day we first ran into each other. I sat in my truck with the air conditioning turned off, letting the sweat stick my shirt to my back as I waited and watched car after car pull up to drop off kids for what appeared to be some kind of regular practice or game. Then, right on schedule because Victoria had always been obsessively punctual when it made her look good to other people, her silver SUV appeared in the parking lot. Luna jumped out first, laughing and clutching that same bright orange basketball, her energy infectious even from a distance. Victoria followed with a fold-out chair and her phone already in her hand, completely distracted by whatever was on her screen. This was my opportunity, and I knew I might not get another one anytime soon. I walked across the pavement slowly, trying to look casual, though my steps felt like thunder in my ears, even though no one else seemed to notice my approach. "Ethan," Victoria said the moment she spotted me, instantly shifting into that tone of irritated suspicion I remembered so well. "What the hell are you doing here?" I shrugged, attempting to match her casual energy even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Just wanted to watch a game," I said. "You used to like it when I showed up to things that mattered to you." Her eyes narrowed dangerously, and I could see her calculating whether to cause a scene or try to handle this quietly. "Don't play this angle with me," she warned. "You have absolutely no right to show up here uninvited." "I have every right if she's mine," I said, meeting her stare directly. Victoria looked around like she was considering making a public spectacle, but couldn't quite afford the attention it would bring. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. "Back off, Ethan. This isn't some soap opera drama for your entertainment." "Could have fooled me," I said, allowing myself just enough of a smile to let her know I wasn't backing down. Before she could fire back with whatever cutting response she was preparing, Luna came running up to us, holding a water bottle and a loose hair tie that had apparently come undone during her game. "Mommy, can you help me fix my ponytail?" she asked, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults around her. Victoria immediately crouched down to Luna's level, and in that brief moment while she was focused on tightening the ponytail and making sure her daughter's hair was secure, I saw my chance. Moving as naturally as I could manage, I reached out and gently plucked a single stray hair off Luna's jersey sleeve, palming it quickly and sliding it into my pocket, like I had done nothing more significant than brushing away a piece of lint. "See you around," I said to Victoria, turning and walking away before she could chase me down or demand to know what I was really doing there. Later that evening, Connor met me in his garage workshop. I handed him the hair sample in a small Ziploc bag, and he didn't ask any questions about how I had obtained it, just nodded with professional efficiency and said, "You'll have your answer in 3 days. 3 days. 72 hours to find out if my entire understanding of the past 4 years was about to change completely. And every single second of that waiting period felt like trying to hold my breath underwater while the pressure built to unbearable levels. The waiting period turned out to be a special kind of psychological torture that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I barely managed to sleep more than 2 or 3 hours at a stretch, and every dream I did have twisted into surreal scenes I didn't want to experience. One night, I found myself dreaming that Victoria was holding Luna's hand as they both waved at me from the front porch of a house I didn't recognize, smiling like they were completely happy without me. The next night, I was the one standing on an unfamiliar doorstep, knocking persistently on a door that never opened, no matter how hard or how long I tried. 3 days dragged by at an agonizing pace. I couldn't bring myself to eat anything substantial. Everything tasted like cardboard and sat in my stomach like a lead weight. I couldn't think straight about anything else, couldn't focus on work, couldn't even manage simple conversations without my mind wandering back to the same obsessive loop of questions and possibilities. Everything around me seemed to blur into background noise while one thought screamed louder than all the rest. What if she's actually mine? Then, at exactly 6:27 p.m. on the third night, my phone finally lit up with Connor's name on the screen. I answered before the first ring had even finished. "Results are in," he said without any preamble. "You need to come over here right now." I didn't even bother grabbing my keys properly. I just ran straight out the door, leaving it unlocked behind me in my rush to get to Connor's place. His garage was already open when I arrived, and he was sitting on a folding chair staring down at his laptop screen with an untouched beer sitting beside him on his workbench. That detail alone, the fact that Connor, who never let a beer go to waste, had left it completely ignored, told me everything I needed to know before he even said a word. I walked straight over to him, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "Tell me," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Without saying anything, he turned the laptop screen toward me so I could see it clearly. The PDF document was already open, displaying the official laboratory results in clean, clinical formatting. My eyes went directly to the bottom line, the only sentence that mattered. Probability of paternity, 99.987%. I didn't speak immediately. I couldn't. The numbers seemed to blur and shift on the screen as the reality of what I was seeing sank in. Connor said what I couldn't manage to articulate. "She's yours, Ethan. Luna is definitely your daughter." My knees buckled completely, and I had to grab the edge of the workbench to keep myself upright, bracing my entire weight against it while I tried to process the magnitude of what this meant. Luna, my daughter. She had been out there in the world for her entire life, living and growing and developing her own personality. And I hadn't been allowed to be any part of it because her mother had decided I wasn't interesting enough to deserve the truth. Victoria had known all along. For 4 years, she had carried this secret while building a completely different life with Derek, letting him believe he was Luna's father while systematically erasing me from the picture entirely. "She knew all this time," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria knew Luna was mine, and she never said a word." Connor nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Looks that way, man." I left Connor's garage without saying much else, just got in my truck and drove aimlessly through the city streets. I didn't have a destination in mind until I found myself pulling into the same basketball court where I had first seen them together, where I had stolen that precious hair sample that changed everything. It was late now, completely empty except for the steady hum of the street lights and the quiet echo of everything that had been stolen from me over the past 4 years. I sat there in my truck for an hour, then 2, letting the full weight of the situation settle over me like a heavy blanket. The rage didn't hit me all at once like I thought it would. Instead, it simmered low and steady, building slowly, like a fuse that had finally caught fire after years of waiting. I could see it all clearly now. The way Victoria had looked at me that day outside the hardware store. The way she had brushed off my questions with that characteristic smirk. She wasn't just keeping a secret from me. She was actively playing a starring role in a life she had built on top of the complete ruins of mine. She had made the unilateral decision that I didn't deserve to know I had a daughter, that I wasn't worthy of being part of Luna's world, and she had been content to let me live with that absence forever. But now everything had changed. Now I knew the truth, and I was going to make some choices of my own. My next move was crystal clear. I needed to talk to a lawyer. Not because I wanted revenge against Victoria, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. I wanted my daughter to know the truth about who her real father was. The following morning, I walked into the law office of Patricia Heller, a family attorney who had built a reputation around Jacksonville for being precise, relentless, and completely unbothered by anyone's personal drama. She was exactly what I needed. Someone who could cut through the emotional mess and focus on the legal realities of the situation. I sat across from her in a conference room that smelled like pine cleaner and old paperwork, and I laid out the entire story methodically. The affair that ended my marriage, the divorce, the 4 years of complete silence, the accidental encounter that led to my discovery of Luna's existence, and finally, the DNA test that confirmed she was mine beyond any reasonable doubt. Patricia didn't flinch or show any surprise as I talked. She just nodded occasionally, took detailed notes, and asked pointed questions like she was assembling a case file for an upcoming war. "Do you want full custody?" she asked when I finished, her tone completely matter-of-fact. The question stopped me cold. I realized I hadn't thought that far ahead, hadn't considered what the end goal of this process actually was. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I haven't even had a real conversation with her yet. She doesn't know who I am. Hell, until a few days ago, I didn't even know she existed." Patricia leaned forward across the table, her expression serious but not unsympathetic. "Listen, Ethan, you can't unknow what you know now. You're Luna's biological father, and that's a legal reality whether Victoria likes it or not. You don't have to decide everything right this moment. But if you want any part in her life going forward, we have to move quickly. Especially if the mother isn't going to be cooperative about this. Cooperative. That was definitely not a word I would ever use to describe Victoria. Especially when it came to admitting she had been wrong about something this significant. I left Patricia's office carrying a folder full of legal options and paperwork, my heart weighed down by the crushing reality of what lay ahead. This wasn't just about Victoria and me anymore. Wasn't just about settling old scores or proving points. This was about a child, my child, who had a fundamental right to know who her father actually was. I tried calling Victoria 3 separate times over the next 2 days. Each call went straight to voicemail, which told me everything I needed to know about her willingness to have an adult conversation about this situation. On the 4th attempt, she finally picked up, and her greeting was exactly what I expected. "What?" she said immediately. No hello, no acknowledgement that we were 2 adults who needed to have a serious discussion. Just that single word, delivered with all the warmth and cooperation of a slammed door. "You lied to me," I said without any preamble of my own. "You looked me straight in the face and lied about something that fundamentally changed my entire life." "I told you she wasn't yours," she replied flatly, like she was discussing the weather rather than the most significant deception imaginable. "You're the one who decided not to believe me. I had her DNA tested, Victoria." The words hung in the air between us for a moment, and I could practically hear her brain scrambling to figure out how to spin this new development in her favor. The silence stretched on long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then she spoke again. "You did what?" "I have scientific proof," I continued, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "Luna is mine. Not Derek's, not some random guy's. Mine." Victoria let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a bark than anything remotely humorous. "You really haven't changed at all, have you?" she said, her tone dripping with familiar condescension. "Always needing to know everything. Always digging around in places you don't belong like you're owed something from the universe." "I was owed something," I snapped back, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "The truth. A chance to be her father from the beginning. You robbed me of 4 years that I can never get back." "She doesn't know you," Victoria shot back immediately. "She's happy with the life she has. She has stability, routine, people who love her. I did what was best for her, not what was convenient for you." "No," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "You did what was best for you. You didn't want to deal with the consequences of what you had done, so you just erased me completely. You made it so I never existed in her world." Her voice hardened into that tone I remembered from our worst fights. The one that meant she was about to say something designed to cut as deeply as possible. "If you think I'm going to let you waltz in here now and completely screw up everything we've built just because you can't handle the fact that I moved on with my life, you don't get to let me do anything," I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm her father. That's not optional, that's not negotiable, and that's definitely not something you get to hide just because it's inconvenient for your narrative." Another long silence, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a threat that was barely concealed. "You really want to do this? You want to drag her through a custody case, lawyers, courtrooms, all because you can't handle that I moved on and built something better? She deserves the truth," I said firmly, "and I'm not going away this time." The line went dead. She had hung up on me, and I found myself staring at my phone screen, still glowing in my hand. That was her answer to everything. When she couldn't control the conversation anymore, she just cut it off entirely. But this time, her refusal to engage wasn't going to make the problem disappear. The war, as I was beginning to think of it, had officially begun. The court papers were filed within a week. Patricia moved with the kind of swift efficiency that made it clear she had dealt with people exactly like Victoria many times before. Narcissists who rewrite history to cast themselves as the hero in every version of the story. Manipulators who hide behind claims of what's best for the child while playing God with other people's lives and relationships. We filed a formal petition to establish legal paternity and secure visitation rights. Patricia had warned me to prepare for serious resistance from Victoria's side, and as usual, she wasn't wrong about anything. Victoria retaliated fast and hard. Within 3 days of being officially served with the legal papers, she submitted a lengthy statement to the court that was full of the same polished, poisonous charm that I remembered so well from our marriage. She claimed that I was emotionally unstable, that I had ambushed both her and Luna in public spaces, and that I had been harassing her with unwanted contact and threatening behavior. She even attached screenshots of some old text messages I had sent during our divorce proceedings. Angry ones from back when I still didn't understand the full scope of her betrayal and was trying to make sense of why my life had exploded overnight. Taken out of context, those messages looked bad. She knew exactly what she was doing. "She's building a wall of lies," Patricia said, flipping through the packet of Victoria's submissions with the kind of clinical detachment that comes from years of experience with these situations. But here's the thing about walls built on lies. The truth doesn't politely knock when it wants to get through. It breaks right through them. In the middle of all this legal maneuvering, something happened that I genuinely didn't expect. I got a phone call from Derek. I almost didn't answer when I saw the unfamiliar number, but curiosity won out over caution. "Ethan," he said, his voice quiet and uncertain, like he wasn't sure whether I would immediately start yelling or just hang up on him. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide my hostility. He sighed heavily, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "She told me what's going on," he said. "About Luna, about the DNA test, about the legal stuff." I said nothing, waiting to see where this was headed. "Look, I didn't know," he continued after a moment. "She never told me there was even a possibility that Luna wasn't mine. She let me believe I was her father this whole time." There it was, the confession, the crack in their perfect story that revealed the truth underneath. Victoria had been lying to everyone, not just me. "She made me believe I was her father," he added, and I could hear something that might have been pain in his voice. "You still living with her?" I asked, genuinely curious about how their relationship had survived this revelation. There was a pause that told me everything I needed to know. "No, I moved out about 2 weeks ago," he said finally. "We've been having problems for a while now. I think seeing you again just accelerated the inevitable." I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or just sick about the whole situation. "I'm not calling to defend her," Derek continued quickly. "But Luna's a good kid, Ethan. She's smart, she's sensitive, she loves animals more than anything. She sleeps with this old stuffed dolphin I gave her when she was just a baby, and she's never once asked where her real dad is or why her family looks different from other families." My throat tightened involuntarily at the image of Luna sleeping with a stuffed animal, completely innocent and unaware of the adult drama swirling around her. "I know I'm not her biological father," Derek said, his voice getting quieter, "but I've been the only father figure she's ever known for her entire life. So I'm just saying, don't hurt her because you want to get back at Victoria. She doesn't deserve to be collateral damage in this war." I hung up without responding. I didn't owe him a conversation, not after what he had done to my marriage, but I couldn't shake his words. Luna didn't ask for any of this chaos. She was the one completely innocent person caught in the wreckage of everything her mother had destroyed. And now she was going to have to deal with two different men. One who had raised her under completely false assumptions, and one who was a complete stranger, suddenly demanding space in her world. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I just sat in the darkness of my living room, holding the only photograph I had of Luna, a blurry snapshot I had managed to take on my phone from that very first day at the basketball court when my world turned upside down. The image was grainy and distant, but it was all I had of my daughter, and I found myself staring at it for hours while wrestling with a question I hadn't been ready to face until that moment. Am I trying to be her father, or am I just trying to prove something to the woman who ruined my life? I didn't answer that question right away. I let it sit with me for several days, the way a deep bruise lingers under your skin. Silent most of the time, but sore and tender every time you accidentally touch it. The weight of Derek's words kept echoing in my mind, forcing me to examine my own motivations in a way that was deeply uncomfortable but probably necessary. Then came the day of the hearing, and everything suddenly felt very real and very final. It was a gray morning, damp enough to make everything feel heavier and more oppressive than usual. The courthouse had that distinctive smell of old carpet, industrial cleaning supplies, and the accumulated tension of hundreds of legal battles fought within those walls. I wore the same navy blazer I had bought for my sister's wedding 3 years earlier, the only piece of formal clothing I owned that still fit properly. Victoria showed up exactly 15 minutes late, which was typical of her strategy to make an entrance and control the room's energy. She was dressed like she was headed to brunch rather than a custody hearing, all polished and put together in a way that suggested this was just another minor inconvenience in her busy social calendar. She didn't look at me when she walked into the courtroom, but I could feel her presence the way you feel a storm approaching from miles away. That electric tension in the air that makes your skin prickle with anticipation. Luna wasn't there, of course. This was just lawyers, legal aides, court reporters, and a judge whose tired eyes suggested he had seen this exact same drama play out countless times before, with different names but identical underlying dynamics. Patricia was sharp and surgical in her presentation. She laid out the timeline methodically. The affair, the deception, the years of silence, the DNA results that proved paternity beyond any reasonable doubt, and the months of deliberate concealment that had robbed me of 4 years of my daughter's life. Her arguments were precise, logical, and devastating in their simplicity. Then Victoria's attorney stood up and turned the entire proceeding into what felt like a carefully orchestrated character assassination. He painted me as fundamentally unstable, claimed that I was motivated entirely by vengeance rather than genuine concern for Luna's welfare, and argued that I was emotionally incapable of providing a safe, nurturing environment for a child. He even referenced my therapy sessions from years ago, the ones I had attended when I was trying to claw my way out of the psychological black hole Victoria had left me in after our divorce. The fact that I had sought professional help to deal with depression and trauma was now being used as evidence that I was unfit to be a father. Taken out of context and twisted through the lens of legal strategy, even my attempts to heal myself were made to look like character flaws. Patricia countered quickly and effectively, but hearing my lowest moments dissected in a public courtroom still cut deeper than I had expected. The room felt several degrees colder after that exchange. Then Victoria took the witness stand, and I watched her perform what might have been the most convincing acting I had ever seen. She lied with the kind of effortless grace that comes from years of practice, painting herself as a protective mother who had made difficult but necessary decisions to shield her child from a potentially dangerous situation. She claimed that I had serious anger management issues, that I used to shut down emotionally during conflicts, and that she hadn't told me about Luna because she was genuinely afraid for her daughter's physical and emotional safety. She even managed to produce tears at exactly the right moments, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue like she was playing a role she had rehearsed 100 times in front of her bathroom mirror. I stared at her throughout her entire testimony, waiting for even a single flicker of genuine truth or remorse to break through the performance. But there was nothing authentic there, just ice-cold calculation dressed up as maternal concern. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood up and completely ignored the carefully prepared notes Patricia had given me. Instead, I looked directly at the judge and told him the simple truth. "I didn't come here to get revenge on Victoria," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "I came here because I learned by complete accident that I have a daughter, and once I knew that fact, I couldn't pretend I didn't know it. I've already lost 4 years of her life that I can never get back. I don't want to take Luna away from everything she knows, and I'm not trying to disrupt her world just to satisfy some personal grudge. I just want the opportunity to know her, and I want her to have the chance to know who her real father is." The judge listened without much visible reaction, occasionally nodding or jotting down brief notes. When all the arguments had been presented and all the evidence had been reviewed, the hearing ended with a temporary court order that felt like both a victory and a compromise. I was granted supervised visitation rights, pending further review and evaluation. Patricia told me afterwards that it was honestly the best outcome we could have hoped for under the circumstances, given Victoria's aggressive legal strategy, and the fact that I was essentially a stranger to Luna at this point. I walked out of that courthouse with a storm of conflicting emotions churning inside me. Not rage exactly, but this heavy, dragging ache that felt like grief mixed with determination. 4 years of my daughter's life had been stolen from me through deliberate deception. I had missed her first words, her first steps, her first day of school, countless bedtime stories and scraped knees, and proud moments that I would never be able to recover. But beneath all of that pain and loss was something new and powerful that I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I had managed to get 1 foot inside Luna's world, and I wasn't backing out now, no matter what Victoria threw at me next. The first supervised visitation was scheduled for the following Saturday at 10 a.m. inside a plain, sterile room at the Family Outreach Center. The space was designed to be neutral and non-threatening, filled with a few basic children's toys, and too many uncomfortable chairs arranged in a way that was supposed to facilitate healthy interaction. A woman named Brenda was assigned as our monitor. She had a kind voice and carried a clipboard, projecting the sort of calm, professional presence that was meant to make everyone feel comfortable in what was inherently an uncomfortable situation. I showed up early, wearing a collared shirt and carrying a book about dolphins that Connor had mentioned Luna might enjoy. My hands wouldn't stop sweating, and I kept checking the clock every 30 seconds like that would somehow make the time pass faster. At 10:07, I heard the door open behind me, and I stood up immediately. Victoria walked in holding Luna's hand, and the sight of them together hit me harder than I had expected. Victoria didn't say a single word to me, just gave me one of those thin, tight smiles that was clearly meant for the benefit of our court-appointed monitor. Her eyes, however, said something entirely different. "Don't think this means you're actually in." Luna looked up at me with an expression that wasn't scared exactly, but wasn't curious either. She seemed polite but guarded, like she had been carefully instructed to be cautious around this strange man who claimed to be important. Her eyes were wide and alert, and her grip on her mother's hand was noticeably tight. But when Brenda gently introduced me as Mr. Ethan, Luna took a small step forward, showing the kind of natural bravery that only children possess. I knelt down to her eye level, trying to make myself seem less intimidating and more approachable. "Hey, Luna," I said softly. "I'm really glad to finally get to spend some time with you." She looked at me for a long moment, then glanced at Brenda as if seeking permission or guidance. Then she asked the question that absolutely gutted me. "Are you my dad?" The directness of it, the innocent way she said it, hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Victoria visibly flinched but didn't speak, clearly not wanting to interfere with whatever answer I was going to give. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I am." Luna stared at me for another beat, processing this information in whatever way a 4-year-old mind makes sense of complicated adult situations. Then she said something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Do you like dolphins too?" "Yeah," I said, feeling some of the tension in my chest finally start to loosen. "I think they're pretty awesome." And that simple exchange, that moment of connection over something as innocent as dolphins, felt like the beginning of everything I had been fighting for. Victoria sat stiffly in the corner of the room throughout our entire first visit, her arms folded across her chest in a defensive posture that radiated disapproval and barely contained hostility. Her presence felt like a dark shadow clinging to the wall, watching and judging every interaction between Luna and me. But after the first 10 or 15 minutes, Luna seemed to tune out her mother's tension and focus entirely on our conversation. I showed her the dolphin book I had brought, carefully pointing out the differences between bottlenose dolphins and spinner dolphins, while she listened with the kind of intense concentration that only children can manage. She asked bright, excited questions about how fast they could swim and whether they really talk to each other underwater. She told me about her stuffed dolphin at home named Flipper Jr., describing in elaborate detail how she had taught him to do tricks, even though he was just a plush toy. Luna was everything Derek had said she would be: smart, funny, naturally curious, and just a little bit shy around new people. But more than that, she was mine. I could see pieces of myself in her expressions, in the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something, in the way she laughed when something genuinely delighted her. We played with some of the toys scattered around the room for what felt like both an eternity and no time at all. Then Brenda's timer went off, signaling that our hour together was over, and I felt my heart sink. Luna looked genuinely disappointed when Brenda announced that our time was up. "Already?" she asked, her voice carrying that particular note of childhood disappointment that makes adults want to change all the rules. I nodded, trying to keep my own disappointment from showing too obviously. "But I'll see you next time, okay?" She hugged the dolphin book tightly to her chest, like it was something precious she wanted to protect. Then she did something I hadn't dared to hope for. She walked over to me and gave me a small, quick hug. It was light and brief, but it was real and spontaneous and completely genuine. Victoria stood up immediately when she saw the hug, moving quickly to take Luna's hand with the kind of possessive urgency that suggested she viewed any affection between us as a threat to be managed. "Say goodbye, honey," Victoria said, her voice artificially sweet for Brenda's benefit, while her eyes remained cold and calculating. Luna waved at me as they left, her small hand moving back and forth with that unself-conscious enthusiasm that children bring to everything they do. I didn't move for a long time after the door closed behind them. I just stood there in that sterile room, staring at the little scuff marks Luna's sneakers had left on the linoleum floor, trying to process the overwhelming mix of emotions churning through my chest. There was pride at how well our first meeting had gone, sadness at how quickly it was over, and a deep, burning rage at everything that had been stolen from me over the past 4 years. But for the first time since my divorce, I had something to hold on to that wasn't just pain and bitterness. I had the beginning of a real relationship with my daughter, and that felt like the most valuable thing in the world. The second visit was noticeably easier than the first. Not easy exactly, but less like walking a tightrope with knives hanging over my head at every moment. Luna came into the room carrying a small sketchbook this time, explaining that she wanted to show me some of her drawings. She flipped through the pages eagerly, pointing out dolphins and cats, and a few shaky stick figures that she had drawn with the kind of intense concentration that children bring to their artwork. Then she stopped at one particular drawing and pointed to the various figures scattered across the page. "That's me, and that's Mommy, and that's Derek," she said matter-of-factly, indicating each stick figure in turn. Then she paused and looked up at me with those wide, honest eyes. "And I didn't know what you looked like before, so I didn't draw you in this one?" The simple honesty of that statement hit me harder than any legal argument or court proceeding ever could. Here was tangible proof of my absence from her life, a family drawing where I simply didn't exist because she had never known I was supposed to be there. "Well, you know what I look like now," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. She smiled with the kind of brightness that can completely transform a child's face. "Maybe I'll add you to the next one I draw." Victoria wasn't in the room during this second visit. Brenda mentioned casually that she had chosen to wait outside in the lobby instead, which I immediately recognized as a tactical move. Victoria wanted to appear cooperative and reasonable for the court's benefit while still maintaining as much control as possible over the situation. But I didn't care about her motivations. Her absence gave Luna the space to be herself without worrying about her mother's approval or disapproval, and that space felt infinitely precious to both of us. We read together from the Dolphin book, taking turns with different pages. We played a simple board game that Luna had picked out from the room's collection of toys, and she beat me twice. Once because she was genuinely clever at strategy, and once because she cheated in the most obvious way possible while I pretended not to notice. The hour passed far too quickly again, but at the end of our time together, I gave her a small gift. A soft, plush dolphin that wasn't flashy or expensive, just something gentle and comforting with a small tag attached that read, "For Luna, from Dad." She hugged the dolphin without any hesitation, holding it close to her chest like it was exactly what she had been hoping for. That simple word, Dad, hung in the air between us, raw and fragile and more meaningful than any legal document could ever be. After they left that day, Brenda handed me her notes for the court record, the official documentation that would be submitted as evidence of how our visits were progressing. "You're doing really well with her," Brenda said, with the kind of professional warmth that suggested she had seen many of these situations go much worse. "Just keep showing up consistently and keep being patient with the process." But it wasn't nearly as simple as just showing up. That night, I received an email from Victoria that was characteristically short and cold. "You're confusing her. She's been asking questions I can't answer without making this whole situation worse for everyone involved. Back off." I stared at that message for a long time, reading it over and over while trying to decode the layers of manipulation and control embedded in those few sentences. Then I typed back a response that was equally brief, but infinitely more honest. "You had 4 years to tell her the truth about who her father was. Now she's learning it directly from me. That's not confusion, that's clarity." Victoria didn't respond to my email, but 2 days later, Derek called me again with information that confirmed what I had already suspected was happening behind the scenes. "I'm just going to say this directly," Derek said, without any preamble when I answered the phone. "Victoria's completely unraveling. She's angry all the time now, snapping at Luna over tiny things, and she's been drinking more than she used to. She's scared of losing control," I said, stating what seemed obvious to everyone except Victoria herself. "Yeah," Derek agreed, "and maybe she's scared of losing Luna entirely." I didn't respond immediately because deep down, I knew he was probably right. This wasn't just about a custody agreement anymore, or about legal visitation schedules. This was about a little girl who deserved so much better than being trapped between a lie that was finally crumbling and a grudge that had been festering for years. And Victoria, for all her careful planning and manipulation, wasn't going to give up her grip on the situation without the kind of fight that could damage everyone involved. Victoria's unraveling wasn't just something Derek hinted at over the phone. It became visible and undeniable during our third scheduled supervised visit. The change in Luna was immediately apparent the moment she walked through the door. Her usual bounce and energy were completely missing, replaced by a quiet, subdued demeanor that set off alarm bells in my head. She clutched her dolphin plush tightly against her chest and kept scanning the room with nervous eyes, like she was expecting something bad to happen at any moment. When she sat down beside me, she didn't speak for almost 5 minutes. which was completely unlike the chatty, curious child I'd been getting to know. Brenda picked up on the change in Luna's behavior immediately, her professional instincts clearly alerting her that something was wrong at home. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently, crouching down to Luna's eye level. Luna just shrugged in response, but then she said something that made my stomach twist into knots. "Mommy cried a lot last night. She said people want to take me away from her." The words hung in the air like a physical weight, and I felt a surge of anger at Victoria for involving Luna in adult problems that a 4-year-old should never have to worry about. But I also felt a deep sadness for my daughter, who was clearly being used as an emotional pawn in her mother's deteriorating mental state. "I told her I didn't want to go away anywhere," Luna added quickly, looking up at me with those wide, worried eyes. "Are you trying to take me away from Mommy?" The question broke my heart because it revealed just how much confusion and fear Victoria had been dumping on this innocent child. "No, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice as soft and reassuring as possible. "I would never do anything to scare you or make you feel unsafe. I just want to spend time with you and get to know you better. That's all." Luna nodded slowly, processing this information in whatever way a child's mind tries to make sense of adult complications. Then, she whispered something that made me want to drive straight to Victoria's house and have a very serious conversation about appropriate parenting. "I think Mommy's really mad at you." "She might be," I admitted honestly, because I had learned that children can usually detect lies better than adults. "But that's not your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about. Sometimes grown-ups don't handle their feelings the right way, but that doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to you." She blinked at me like she was trying to decide whether I was one of the grown-ups who actually did handle things the right way, or if I was just another source of unpredictable adult drama in her young life. After that visit, Brenda pulled me aside with the kind of serious expression that meant she was about to deliver news I probably didn't want to hear. "This situation might need to escalate to the next level," she said quietly. "The emotional stress Luna is showing is becoming concerning, and it's clearly affecting her sense of security and stability." Patricia didn't waste any time once she received Brenda's report. She immediately filed an emergency petition requesting a psychological evaluation for Victoria. Not an aggressive attack, just a standard wellness check that was routinely ordered in custody cases where one parent was showing signs of emotional instability or creating an unhealthy environment for the child. The filing of that petition was like lighting a match near a gas leak. Victoria absolutely exploded. She called me in the middle of the night, and I could tell immediately from her voice that she had been drinking heavily. The conversation started with her crying and talking about how unfair everything was. But within minutes, she had shifted to furious accusations and threats. "You're poisoning her against me!" she spat into the phone, her words slightly slurred but her anger crystal clear. "You think this is going to make her love you more than she loves me? You think you can just waltz back into our lives and become the hero of this story?" "This isn't about you, Victoria," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady despite my own rising anger. "This is about Luna, and you're clearly not okay right now. Everyone can see it. Even Derek sees it." The mention of Derek's name seemed to break something inside her, and her voice cracked with genuine pain for the first time in the conversation. "You think you can just take everything away from me the same way I took everything away from you? Is that what this is really about? You took something from me that I never even got the chance to hold," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "This isn't about revenge, Victoria. This is about justice. This is about a little girl who deserves to know the truth about who her father is." She hung up on me without another word, but the damage was already done. Her late-night drunken phone call had revealed just how far her mental state had deteriorated, and it wouldn't be long before that instability started affecting Luna in ways that couldn't be hidden or explained away. 2 days later, Victoria didn't show up for our next scheduled visit. Brenda waited in the family center room, and so did I. But Luna never came through that door. I called Patricia immediately, and she called the court, and by Monday morning we were standing in front of a judge again. Victoria's excuse was that she had been sick, and that Luna was feeling overwhelmed by the whole process. She claimed that the supervised visits were causing too much emotional stress for her daughter, and that continuing them would be damaging to Luna's psychological well-being. The judge wasn't impressed by her arguments, especially given the reports he had received about Victoria's deteriorating behavior and Luna's obvious anxiety. He issued a temporary modification to our custody arrangement that felt like a significant victory. My visitation was increased and the supervision requirement was removed, meaning I could spend time with Luna without Brenda monitoring our every interaction. He also scheduled a comprehensive home inspection for Victoria's residence, which would involve social workers evaluating the living environment and determining whether it was suitable for a young child. For the first time since this entire legal battle had begun, I could see the tide starting to shift in my favor. And for the first time, I saw what it looked like when someone who had spent their entire life controlling every narrative finally started losing control of how the story was going to end. The home inspection did exactly what I had suspected it would do. It tore away Victoria's carefully constructed mask and revealed the chaos underneath. The official report came back written in the kind of clinical, diplomatic language that social workers use, but the message was clear and damning. The inspector noted significant tension in the household environment, a highly agitated maternal presence during the evaluation, and an overall emotional climate not conducive to stable child rearing. In plain English, that meant Victoria was spiraling out of control, and Luna was trapped inside that spiral with nowhere safe to turn. It wasn't documented abuse in the traditional sense, nothing that could be photographed or reported to police. But it was emotional chaos and instability, and that was more than enough for the judge to make a decision that changed everything. I was granted temporary shared custody at a 50-50 split. For the first time in Luna's life, she would be spending equal time with both of her parents. The first night Luna stayed at my apartment was surreal in ways I hadn't anticipated. She walked through every room like she was stepping into a story she wasn't entirely sure she belonged in yet. She paused in the hallway to examine the small gallery of photos I had hung the week before. Pictures of the two of us from our supervised visits. One of her at the basketball court holding her dolphin plush. Another of me holding the book open while she pointed excitedly at a cartoon whale. "Did you make this wall just for me?" she asked, her voice filled with the kind of wonder that only children can express so purely. I nodded, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. "Yeah, I did." She smiled with that radiant brightness that could completely transform her entire face. "It looks happy." Those simple words, "it looks happy," hit me with more force than anything Victoria had ever said during our most brutal courtroom exchanges. The honest innocence in that observation almost broke me completely. We made macaroni and cheese for dinner because that was what Luna requested, and she insisted that we eat it on the living room couch while watching a dolphin documentary. She talked through the entire program, sharing fascinating facts about how dolphins sometimes get sad when they're separated from their families, and how they always stay close to each other when one of them is hurt or in trouble. "Are people supposed to be like that too?" she asked during a particularly touching segment about dolphin family bonds. "Yeah," I said quietly, thinking about all the ways adults complicate the simple truths that children understand instinctively. That's definitely the idea. Later, when I tucked her into the small bed I had set up in what was now officially her room, she held onto my hand longer than I had expected her to. "Are you going to be here tomorrow when I wake up?" she asked. And the question revealed just how much uncertainty and abandonment she had experienced in her short life. "I'll be here every single time you want me to be," I promised her, and I meant every word of that commitment. She nodded solemnly, rolled onto her side, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was breathing with the deep, peaceful rhythm of childhood sleep. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time afterward, just watching her sleep and listening to the sound of her breathing. A sound I had never known I was missing until I finally had it. Outside that quiet room, Victoria's carefully constructed world was burning down around her as she made increasingly desperate phone calls and whispered frantic complaints to anyone who would still listen about betrayal and injustice and manipulation. But inside my home, everything was still and peaceful for the first time in years. That night, Derek sent me a text message that was surprisingly supportive. "I think you're doing the right thing. She's better off with you." I didn't reply because I didn't need to. The war that Victoria had started with her lies and deception was finally winding down, and she just didn't realize it yet. The final hearing wasn't loud or dramatic like I had somehow expected it to be. There weren't any explosive confrontations, screaming matches, or public breakdowns that you might see in a movie. Instead, it was quieter and more subdued than I had anticipated. Like everyone in that courtroom already knew how the story was going to end, and the judge was simply there to turn the last page and make it official. Victoria showed up wearing a navy suit that I had never seen before, something expensive looking that she had probably bought specifically for this occasion. But clothes couldn't hide what months of stress and spiraling had done to her. She looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than just physical tiredness. She looked tired in her bones, worn down by the weight of maintaining lies that were becoming impossible to sustain. Her eyes were hollow, her cheekbones sharper than I remembered them being, like the bitterness and anger she had been clinging to so desperately had started eating her alive from the inside out. She didn't speak during the proceedings. Her lawyer did all the talking for her. Her attorney made one last attempt to salvage her position, talking about confusion and pressure and a mother's natural fear of losing her child. He used carefully chosen words like complicated and misunderstood, trying to paint Victoria as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of a 4-year deception that had damaged everyone involved. But none of his arguments stuck anymore. The facts had become immovable and undeniable. The DNA evidence, the missed visits, the psychological evaluation report, the documented breakdown, and most importantly, the simple truth that had been buried under layers of lies for far too long. Patricia spoke with clean, surgical precision, laying out our case without any wasted words or emotional manipulation. "This child has a fundamental right to know her biological father," she said, addressing the judge directly. "And more than that, she has a right to safety, emotional stability, and consistency in her living environment. We're not asking the court to completely remove her from her mother's life. We're asking for protection from the kind of ongoing psychological damage that comes from years of systematic deception and emotional instability." Then it was my turn to address the court one final time. I stood up and decided not to read from the prepared statement Patricia had written for me. Instead, I spoke directly from my heart about what this entire ordeal had really been about. "I don't want to erase Victoria from Luna's life," I said, looking directly at the judge. "I don't want to replace anyone or pretend that the past 4 years didn't happen. I just want the opportunity to be Luna's father, really be her father. I want to give her what she was denied for the first 4 years of her life through no fault of her own. And I'm ready to do that completely, with honesty, love, and whatever else she needs from me." The judge nodded thoughtfully and made a few final notes in his file. Then, without any grand speeches or dramatic flourishes, he delivered his decision with the kind of matter-of-fact authority that comes from years of making difficult choices about broken families. Joint legal custody would be maintained, meaning both Victoria and I would have input on major decisions affecting Luna's life. But primary physical custody was being transferred to me, effective in 30 days. Luna would live with me most of the time, with scheduled visitation for Victoria. Victoria didn't cry when she heard the ruling. She didn't shout or protest or cause any kind of scene. She just sat there looking stunned and empty, like she was finally understanding that the world wasn't going to bend to accommodate her version of reality anymore. Luna moved in with me officially the following month, and I won't lie and say it was magical or perfect like something from a fairy tale. There were genuinely hard days. Days when she would sit quietly by the window holding her dolphin plush and ask why her mommy was always so angry now. Days when she would go completely silent, and I could see her little mind trying to process emotions and situations that no 4-year-old should have to navigate. But she stayed. And more importantly, she began to flourish in ways that broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. Slowly but steadily, she started to laugh again with genuine joy instead of nervous energy. She began eating meals without having to be asked twice. She started asking questions that weren't laced with caution or fear of saying the wrong thing. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had moved in permanently, I found a new drawing taped to the refrigerator. This one showed 4 stick figures arranged across the page. Luna, me, a cat we didn't actually own yet, but that she apparently hoped we would get someday, and Victoria. But this time, Victoria's figure was drawn off to the side, smaller and more faded than the others, like she was part of the picture, but not central to it. Luna came into the kitchen while I was looking at her artwork, and she stood beside me studying her own creation with the serious concentration that children bring to their most important projects. "I still love her," she said quietly, and the simple honesty of that statement reminded me why I had fought so hard to get to this point. "But I like it better here with you." I knelt down beside her so we were at the same eye level, and I wrapped my arms around her in a hug that felt like it contained 4 years' worth of missed embraces. "You don't have to choose between loving your mom and feeling safe and happy," I told her. "You can love her and still be glad to be here with me." She smiled with that radiant brightness that had become my favorite thing in the entire world. "I know that now, but I'm really glad you found me." "I'm glad you found me too," I said, and I meant it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. What I learned from this entire experience is something that I think a lot of people need to hear. People will rewrite history in whatever way they need to in order to sleep at night. They'll lie, they'll twist facts, they'll run from consequences, and they'll do whatever it takes to avoid facing the truth about their own actions. But the truth, Real, fundamental truth doesn't just disappear because someone finds it inconvenient. It waits quietly, sometimes for years, but it always surfaces eventually. If you're in a situation like I was, if you've been lied to, betrayed, or systematically erased from something that should have been yours, don't let that betrayal become your entire identity. Fight back, but fight for the right reasons. Fight not for revenge or to prove a point, but for truth. Fight for healing, for justice, and for whatever it is that truly belongs to you. Because in the end, that's the only kind of victory that actually means anything.